All righty, it's my pleasure to now introduce our main speaker, David from Palmdale.
Hi, my name's David, and I'm a real alcoholic. And I want to congratulate the chip takers and the birthday people. Okay, I've worn my suit. It's time to come off. I've been around long enough to realize that it's an honor for you to be asked to speak. I appreciate it. You want to hear my history, my story. And I was around to learn from the old timers that whenever you're asked to speak, to wear a suit. So I did. And I have no idea what I'm going to say tonight. The hour and a half drive here, I just drew a blank. I made sure not to think about what I'm going to say. But I will try to give you experience, strength, and hope. And 45 minutes of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So, my mom was a stripper. My dad was a jazz musician. And they taught me how to do drugs really good. So drugs is a big part of my story. And there is some profanity. I see there's some children in here, so pardon it. I'll try to keep the profanity down. I'm a little nervous. I'll let you know that because I don't do this. I'm not a circuit speaker. But Mom and Dad were definitely party animals. I mean, I remember smoking dope with my mom and dad when I was 5. They let me roll the joints. They let me clean the weed. And I became an epileptic kid at one point in my life. So that made me different. And I hated it because I was on phenobarbital and Dilantin. And the teachers made sure I was different. Because in school they say, everybody, when little Davy goes out on the playground, please let me know if he has a seizure. So I knew, why are you pointing the finger at me? I mean, so I knew I was different. And I learned real young how to be industrious. I mowed lawns. I thought behind everybody's front door that everybody got loaded like my family. That was the norm. I'm not a comedian, so if you happen to find some identity, it'll be through laughter. I like to do drugs, and I didn't learn how to drink until I was 13 years old. When I was a kid, I had a paper route because, as I said, I was industrious, and I was an epileptic kid on a bicycle. And then this guy comes around a corner on a motorcycle, and I said, nice bike, and he said, it's for sale. So I went home, got the money. Now I'm an epileptic kid on a motorcycle with a paper route, taking phenobarbital and Dilantin. And when I was in school, I want you to understand one thing. If there's anything I get across to you, especially you newcomers, your sobriety is extremely fragile. I don't care what anybody says. My sobriety is fragile. I have that monster in the back of my head doing one-arm push-ups telling me, it'll be okay, just one won't hurt. But you see, one's too much, 100 aren't enough. So, when I got this motorcycle, I learned that there was this thing called motocross. And I wanted to start racing. And I met a kid in school that raced motocross, and I went over to his house, and I was 13 years old at the time, and he gave me my first beer. Now, I watched how all the other kids were drinking the beer, and I took a sip off it, and I hated the taste of it. It tasted awful. I mean, what, you guys drinking this crap? Come on. So I watched how they were drinking, and they were slugging it down. I thought, well, I guess that's the way you drink beer. So I did. I chugged it down. And I hated the taste, but I sure loved what it did to me. Yeah. I just became one of the guys. I'm one of them now. And so that started my drinking career. Mom and Dad tried to make a deal with me, telling me, hey, don't do drugs until you're 16. It's like, yeah, right. That's not going to work. I was stealing roaches from their ashtray all the time. And another thing is alcoholics are extremely intelligent. If you think about all the times you got out, you talked your way out of something, Think how intelligent you had to be to talk your way out of that. I mean, I literally talked my way out of a DUI once, but I'm not going to get into that one. So I started my drinking and I started my drugging, and I'm an epileptic kid taking phenobarbital and Dilantin, and I finally grew out of the epilepsy, but still the schools had me down as an epileptic. I continued to party. I like party favors. Like I said, Mom and Dad taught me the best way to take drugs. If you're going to take one will make you feel good, so take two. And I learned about my drinking that I was slugging them down pretty good. And, you know, I got friends that took pictures of me when I was passed out underneath my van with Ralph laying next to me. A nice guy. So why are you guys taking pictures of me? So that was the start of my life in my teenage years. And it got to a point where me and my dad were slugging it out on the front lawn. And again, as I said, we're intelligent. And I figured out how to get out of high school at 17 and a half at the mid-semester break. Me and Dad were throwing blows, and I went to my school teacher. I only needed 5 units to graduate. And Mr. Westaway, I told him, hey, I'm going to take a GED. I don't need this crap. He goes, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to Northern California, build log cabins, and grow marijuana. And he said, well, if you write me a letter once a week, I'll make sure you get your diploma. And lo and behold, come August, I got my diploma in the mail because I wrote him once a week. I'd write him letters like, hey, this week I learned how to fall trees with a chainsaw. This week I learned how to bark the trees and notch them for our log cabins. This week I learned how to skin rabbits and have rabbits and eggs. And this week I learned how to make rabbit turd tea because it made our plants grow big and strong. One of the things about living in Hayfork, California was when I went up there the first night was I wanted to show those people I knew how to drink. But I woke up on the bed of a 49 steak bed about 3 o'clock in the morning, or came to. My drinking progressed, and I went into the Air Force, you know, because I heard a marching song one day. I thought, well, I'm going to the Air Force. Sounds like a good idea. And I learned in Texas that you can drink and drive. You're allowed to have a beer while you drive. This is back in 1976. But as my drinking progressed, because you could drink at 18, the Air Force, when I was in for 6 months and a day, they came to me and they said, you know, we don't know about you working on helicopters. We think you drink a little bit much. You keep showing up to school inebriated. We're going to let you go. So they let me go. I came back home and I got a job in the printing industry. And in that printing industry, we worked an hour on, an hour off. And the nice thing about that, well, what do you do on your hour off? Well, you go to the bar that's right across the street from the printing industry. And we were printing, we had printing presses that were 2 stories high and a city block long, big rotary presses. So made great money, but every hour on, hour off, we'd be at the bar or out in the parking lot getting loaded. I met her at a wedding, and we got married. She was a dinner cocktail waitress. And I figured if I'm going to have a party buddy, I'd marry a dinner cocktail waitress. And my first DUI, everybody watches TV. And my first DUI, I made sure to get a copy of the arrest report. See, because again, I'm intelligent, and that officer, I know, wrote something down wrong in that arrest report. And I'm going to beat it in court. Okay? But reading my arrest report, and I still have it at home every now and then, I get to read it just to enjoy it. It said, officer observed defendant make U-turn with heavy smoke emitting from rear wheel wells and go from 0 to 60 in the parking lane. Upon being pulled over, exited vehicle with Heineken in hand. So I didn't beat that one. But Judge Ruffner of the Van Nuys Superior Court decided that I needed to go to traffic school. And in that traffic school back in 1976, I had to go to AA meeting. Now, up until then, I had no idea about AA or sobriety. You got to remember, I grew up with a party family. In fact, I didn't have my bar mitzvah until I was 29. I had to talk to my rabbi about that. I asked my rabbi, I said, because I found out that I could have my bar mitzvah at 29. I asked the rabbi, I said, what do you think the odds are that I was a drunk at my bris? And he said, I think they may have given you a few cotton balls of Manischewitz, it's too many. So, yeah, I was like a horse out of the starting gate. I was just destined to become a drug addict and an alcoholic. So I get that wet reckless. I go to traffic school. They tell me I got to go to AAA meeting. I've never been to an AA meeting before. I go to Sherman Way and Reseda. I go upstairs. Now, I don't know about you, but every alcoholic, me of my caliber, I made sure to have 2 tall 16-ounce Budweisers in my van waiting for me after I got done with that AA shit. I went and I don't remember anything being said. I just remember everybody smoking and having a good time. And there was this speaker guy. His name was Aldo Ray. I remember him being an actor. And all I remember, you know how you read the cartoons and you have that thought bubble? I had a thought bubble that was to haunt me. And as I walked after the meeting, and getting the only signature I needed on a court card, you only needed one. As I walked across Reseda Boulevard, I realized in the back of my head it was saying, Dave, there's a solution to your problem. You just got to be willing to admit that you got a problem. But it didn't. I was to take that and run. But that's step one. Admit that we're powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable. I'm 21 years old. My life isn't unmanageable. Yes, it is. So I meet her, we get married, I get another DUI, I got to do some time down at Biscaloo. You know what I learned when you go do weekends at Biscaloo, if you eat a Quaalude and drink a bottle of peach brandy, you can sleep your weekend away and you get kicked out on Sunday morning. I found out that they classify 3 days as 6 o'clock in the evening to 6 on Friday to 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So I just peach brandy and a Quaalude. Now, I'm such an intelligent alcoholic that we all like Halloween parties. I went to a Halloween party dressed as a Quaalude once. And my guys we all raced motocross, so they took my costume and they hung it on the front of the chimney out front of the house. So they still won't let me live that one down, so I went as a Quaalude, a Roar 714. So I got my second DUI. I had to do weekends at Biscaloo. I had to do 15 days. And I got my third DUI in Newhall. I couldn't make it into my driveway without flipping my car upside down. Now, when you flip your car upside down in front of your driveway at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're in front of your house. It seemed like a really good idea to go have something to drink because I needed a drink. And then I hear, and I go answer the door, and there's a CHP standing there. I said, hi, can you help me? As I'm standing there holding a drink in my hand, he goes, is that your car? I said, yes, it is. And he goes, well, you left the scene of an accident. I said, how could I? I'm standing 25 feet away. And then she came to the door, and she had a little cut on her forehead. And he said, was she in the car? I said, yes. He goes, all right, we're arresting you on a felony because blood was drawn at the scene. Now, here's where my intelligence wanes in. I decide I'm going to save you, the taxpayers, the money of a trial. I'm going to go plead out the case. But I want to drop to a misdemeanor because I don't want any felonies on my record. And I go to the deputy DA in Newhall, or Valencia, and I tell him I want to talk to him, and he, what's this about? I said, I'd like you to drop the charges from a felony to a misdemeanor. And I had her with me, and he said, why would I do that? And I looked at him, I said, well, it really doesn't matter what you do to me as a punishment. It will never amount to the grief that this woman gives me for the rest of our marriage. So he dropped it to a misdemeanor. See, I told you, we're intelligent. I kept drinking for another couple of years. The drinking kept getting worse. It got to the point where I woke up one morning, I found my stepson hiding in the closet, and the house was just ripped up. And I looked at Paul and I said, Paul, what happened last night? And he looked at me and he said, you happened. I said, I happened. What do you mean I happened? He goes, you did this. And I had tore the house up. You know, resentment is like drinking the poison and waiting for the other person to die. I had a neighbor who was going to AA meetings. I had been going to AA meetings, but I never raised my hand as a newcomer because I was always stoned when I went. So if I'm stoned, why would I raise my hand as a newcomer? Because I'm going to have a beer when I get home. So Jan lived 2 doors down, and I'd see him at meetings, and every time I'd walk up to Jan, he'd walk away from me. But at home, he'd talk to me like we're neighbors. So one day I saw him, and this happened to be a couple of days. I have to digress for a second. That woman that I was married to, it got to a point where I looked at her and I said, I can't get sober with you around. Go stay with your sister for at least 6 months and let me get my shit together. But you see, the problem here was I was always getting my shit together. Always. So she went to stay with her sister. And that was the last I ever saw of her. Took her son, and that was it. So I go to a meeting, and there's Jan, and I walk up to Jan, and he walks away from me. I thought, why, you rat bastard motherfucker, why won't you talk to me at a meeting? I'm going to be sitting on your front porch when you get home. I want to know why you won't talk to me. And so Jan came home, and I walked up to him, and I said, hey, Jan, how you doing? He goes, Dave, fine, how you doing? I said, you'll talk to me now? He goes, well, yeah. I said, why won't you talk to me at the meeting? He goes, you still smoking dope before you come to the meeting? I said, well, it's natural. It's an herb. He goes, look, and this is where I heard the music of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, I like talking to the real Dave, not the stoned Dave, not the drunk Dave. I want to talk to the real Dave. If you're at a meeting of AA, I'd like to talk to the real Dave. I said, oh, okay. All of a sudden, it clicked. And as I walked away, that son of a bitch said, if you bother drinking tomorrow or using, don't bother talking to me. And I thought to myself, why, you son of a bitch. I'm not going to drink or use tomorrow just so I can talk to you. Yeah. So I went home and I had a baggie of Thai weed and I had a 6-pack, and there was no way I was going to waste it. There was no way I was going to pour it down the sink. So I drank it and smoked it all. But I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. First time in my life I ever thought I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I thought, some people had said if you have a problem praying, put your shoes under the bed. And while you're down there getting your shoes, say a prayer. Trying to pray is praying. So December 19th, I rolled out of bed onto my knees and I just said, God, please, I just want one fucking day without any chemicals whatsoever. Please, I beg of you. And I went to Chandler Lodge, and then I went for the 9:30 meeting, and then I went to Radford. I got sober at 4343 Radford, and I got sober at Chandler Lodge in North Hollywood. And I went to the 12 o'clock meeting, then went back to the 3 o'clock meeting in Chandler, went back to the 6 o'clock meeting at Radford, and stayed for the 8 o'clock meeting in Radford. And then I went home, and I was so tired I fell asleep. And the second day I woke up, I thought, wow, that was the first time that was my very first day ever sober, unless I was completely forced into being sober, like when you're in jail. So I got to experience my first day of sobriety. I wanted to have a second one. Only this time I didn't use any profanity in that prayer. I thought, wow, that worked. I'll give that a try again. And I asked God, please relieve me of the obsession to drink, smoke, and use just for today. And I got the second day, and the third day, and the fourth day, and I was getting excited. Things were happening. I was First time I'd ever been sober in my life. Mom and Dad aren't sober, and they live next door. On my 6th day, I went to the Camarillo Group speaker meeting, and this guy is sharing. This guy had 20 years of sobriety, and he's talking about how he's lost his house, he's being foreclosed on, his wife left him, he got fired from his job, and he's happy. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. My wife left, I'm unemployed, I'm being evicted. I thought it was supposed to get better. Isn't it supposed to get better? It's supposed to get better. There was a place that, there's 2 meetings that are very important for you newcomers. The meeting before the meeting and the meeting after the meeting. I found there was a coffee shop everybody was going to after the meeting. I decided to go over to that coffee shop. And as I walked into the coffee, is this mine? As I walked into the coffee shop, Bob walked in behind me, the guy with 20 years. Thank you. And I looked at him, I said, hey, I thought it was supposed to get better when you get sober. He goes, it does. I said, well, I don't understand. He goes, are you working the steps? I said, I don't even know what the fucking steps are. I said, that's a shit on the wall, right? He goes, no. Who's your sponsor? I said, I don't have a sponsor. What's a sponsor? And he explained to me what a sponsor was. Bob was to become my sponsor. Bob was to teach me how to work the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous. So as we're progressing, and I'm starting to work step 1, 2, and 3, which are the acceptance steps. I'm working the steps, and about, day 14, day 15, we're at Sitton's restaurant having pie and coffee one evening, and there were a couple of other old-timers there, and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. How long did it take you to go through your steps? And they both barked at me. If you don't do your steps in 45 days, you're wasting our time. They used to take the guys through the steps in 11 hours in the hospital bed. Don't waste our time. We got more people we could spend better time with. So I said, all right. And I did my steps in about 45 days. First 3 steps are the acceptance steps. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the work, the actual work. Now, for you newcomers, I have a little hint for you. If you're working on your 4th step, don't tell your wife. I'm sorry. That's a personal dig at somebody. 10, 11, and 12 are maintenance steps. Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to live. Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to love. Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to put the right date on a check. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of things here that are near and dear to my heart. I met my bride in Alcoholics Anonymous, not in Alcoholics Anonymous. She was a non-alcoholic. But I met her, and Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to love. See, all my life I didn't know what real love was. I was in lust with women. I didn't know what love was. I mean, I say, I love you. I love everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just don't necessarily have to like you. And so I used to tell my wife that I was in like with her when I met her in our first few months of our budding relationship. I tell her I'm in like with her, and she came to me one day and says, why do you tell me you're in like with me? I said, well, she goes, why don't you tell everybody else that you love them? I said, well, because love is a conscious thought. Love is a conscious act that I've learned. And the love I have for my mother is different from the love I have for my father. The love I have for my sister is completely different from the love I have for my mother and my father. And the love I have for people in Alcoholics Anonymous is unconditional, like a child's love. I have to love all of them. And even if I don't like them, if they want help, I'll be there to help them. She goes, well, why can't you tell me? I said, because I haven't made that decision. She goes, all right, you got 2 weeks. So I thought about her for 2 weeks. And every time I thought about her, she brought a smile to my face. Every time I thought about her, it brought a joy to my heart. So I went back to her and I said, I have something I have to tell you. And she goes, oh, what's that? And I said, I don't love you. I'm in love with you. And I was in love with her, and I called her my bride. And we had a wonderful relationship. My wife died 9 months ago from pancreatic cancer. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was there to hold her hand as she took her last breath. One day I walked in to see how she was doing because I was her caregiver the last 8 months. See how she was doing. And she said, "It's a wonderful day." I said, "Really?" And she said, "Because you're in it." Alcoholics Anonymous will give you all kinds of wonderful treasures. I've been able to do things in Alcoholics Anonymous beyond my wildest expectations. My house is paid for, my cars are paid for. I didn't use drug money to buy all that. I didn't use my beer money to buy all that. I even had jobs. I had good jobs. Fear of financial insecurity has left me. I'm just flat out financially insecure, and I'm just used to it. And just like some of the old timers that I've spoken with about, will I ever stop crying about her? They said, no, you'll just deal with the pain and get used to it. And so my financial insecurity, I'm just used to it. But I always seem to have just enough. I always have just enough because of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been able to participate in the Baja 1000. I've been able to jump out of planes. Oh, you're going to like this one. When I was newly sober, my first year, I wanted to get high. I wanted to get high, but I didn't want to get high. You see, I wanted to get high, but not get high. And so I thought, what's a good way to get high? Why, skydiving. Yeah! I'm going to go So I call up Cal City Skydive, and I swear to God, this is how it goes. I call up Cal City Skydive, and they go, "Hi, Cal City Skydive, how can we help you?" I said, "I'd like to go skydiving. Tell me about it." "Oh, we take you up to 4,000 feet, and you jump out, static line, free fall for 10 seconds, and float gently down to earth." I said, "No, that's not what I want." And you hear the change in the guy's voice. "Oh, you want the ultimate high." I said, "Yeah, what's that?" "That's where we take you up to 14,000 feet. And you jump out with 2 jump masters. And you plummet to earth at the speed of 120 miles an hour. "Yeah, book it. I'm there." "Uh-huh. Yep. And I got the pictures to prove it." "Yep." The second time I jumped, I almost died. I got it on videotape. I get to watch that every time. See, I have a very addictive personality. I'm addicted to everything. People like motorcycles? I got 70 of them. You can only ride one at a time. People ask me, "What's your favorite bike?" "The one that runs." So I went skydiving 3 times. First time was like an e-ticket at Disneyland. The second time, I realized reality set in. I'm letting go of a perfectly good airplane. What am I doing? And the third time, I completed all the necessary things that the jump masters wanted me to do, and I got back on that balance beam. We're not absolved of adversity. You're going to face adversity in your sobriety. And that's why you keep calling people. That's the purpose of the phone numbers. Call people. I like people to call me and tell me how their day is going so I can listen how when my day is really shitty and realize they're even more batshit crazy than I am. It's like, yeah, thank you. But call people. We get into the habit of calling people. I like to hear from all my guys. I've sponsored hundreds of guys You're wondering how much time do I have? Well, I'll tell you. I have 14,113 days today. I can only do this one day at a time. That's what I've learned. And if I live through tonight, I'll get to 14,114 tomorrow. I surround myself with people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ironically, everybody get those telemarketer phone calls? Yeah, I know. I'm the guy who apologizes to them before I insult them. I mean, they get on the phone, I say, all right, I understand you have a job, you're a beautiful human being, but now we're going to talk about how your corporation, how fucked up they are. But, ironically, in the past 2 days, I've received 2 calls from vacation resorts. The first one, I told him, look, dude, I'm not in the mood to talk. My wife passed away, and I'm still dealing with that. Immediately, the guy goes, dude, I'm so sorry. Just all you need to know is just one day at a time, okay? What? I don't even know. Where are you? You're in Fort Lauderdale? Are you a friend of Bill's? Yeah. How much time you got? 6 months. Great. You know what happens when one 12-stepper meets another 12-stepper, even on the phone or in Albertsons or at Lowe's or Home Depot? We break out into a meeting. Never fail. Same thing happened the second phone call. This was a lady. She was telling me she wanted to sell me some resorts in Las Vegas. And I told her I'm not in the mood to talk. She had 6 months too. Jeez, I can't get away from them. No matter where I go. You know, anytime you're at Lowe's or Home Depot or at the market and you see somebody that you recognize from a meeting, you look across the room, you kind of go, you'll know you're going to be okay. You might even go up and say, hi, how you doing? I'm Dave. Alcoholics Anonymous taught me so many wonderful things. I have a love for Alcoholics Anonymous that is endless. I thank God every day for that love. I have this one friend, just to tell you about the intelligence of alcoholics. I have this one friend down in Redondo Beach. You look at him, he's a big surfer type dude, all chesty, lives across the street from Redondo, from the beach, got right there. And you look at the guy and think surfer, and you don't realize the guy's an honest-to-God rocket scientist. No, I mean, every time I talk to Brian, what are you doing? I got to go on vacation. Really? Okay. So my daughter lives in Florida. And I was in Florida with my bride we were going there for 2 months and doing the Disney World thing and all that. And I talked to Brian. He goes, where are you at? I said, we're in Melbourne. He goes, oh, give me your address. And the next day, he's knocking on the door. I go, what are you doing here? Now, I knew that he worked for Boeing, but I didn't know what he did. What it turned out that he did, because I finally got it out of him, is the guy who installs the satellites into the rockets. How cool is that? We get to do some really cool shit in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got to work on the world's largest airplane in Mojave. It's called the Stratolauncher. Only one. When I went down for my job interview, this is how an alcoholic's job interview should go. I went in for the job interview. The 2 men were sitting there. They said, tell us about yourself. I said, I can build you a street rod that'll do 200 miles an hour. I can build you a motorcycle that'll leap tall buildings with a single bound. They said, what do you know about building an airplane? I said, I don't know a fucking thing about building an airplane. But if you got instructions, I can build it. And they just looked at me and said, you're hired. We are an intelligent crowd. Don't cut yourself short. It's just that our sobriety is extremely fragile. Alcoholism and drug addiction are the only self-diagnosed diseases in the history of mankind. You don't have it unless you say you have it. The worst thing anybody could do to me is when they come and tell me, Dave, I think I have a drinking problem. Like, well, I hate to tell you, you do. You do have a drinking problem. And there ain't no putting that genie back in the bottle. And the only thing that we get is total abstinence. My body is allergic to chemicals. A couple years ago, I crashed a motorcycle out in the desert. I mean, I really jacked myself up. I broke 10 ribs in 2 places on my right side, broke my scapula and my collarbone, punctured a lung and broke a rib on this side. And so the doctor, I'm in the hospital, I'm screaming whenever I've gone into the hospital a few times because I ride dirt bikes. I've gone in and I tell them, I'm a drug addict, I'm an alcoholic, you got to be careful what you give me. I like that shit too much. So they cut off my t-shirt. I go, hey, that's my favorite t-shirt. He goes, not anymore. And they're getting ready to cut off my new riding pants. I said, no, I'll get out of them. Broken up as I am, I managed to scoot out of them on the gurney. And then he looks at me and he goes, I got this tube I got to put in you. I go, why? He goes, you have a punctured lung. We have to put this tube in you. I said, well, go ahead. He goes, no, you don't understand. It's going to hurt. I said, worse than I'm hurting now? He goes, oh, yeah, we're going to give you fentanyl and ketamine. I said, you got to be careful of that shit. I like that stuff. He goes, no, it's doctor administered. I'm in charge. I said, well, all right. And anybody here ever had ketamine? Oh, I found out why they call it Special K. So they give me this fentanyl and this ketamine, and the next thing I know, I become Spider-Man. I mean, I look down, I'm wearing the Spider-Man outfit. I go, pew, pew, and I'm swinging in the buildings. I'm screaming, Yahoo, I'm Spider-Man. And the next thing you know, I'm looking up, and the nurse is looking down at me. She goes, Mr. Anton, do you remember what you were talking about? I said, yeah, I was Spider-Man. And she looked at the doctor, and he said, he remembers. I looked up at her, I said, hey, when I was younger, I used to eat a lot of LSD. It doesn't hold a candle to that ketamine shit. Keep that shit away from me. Yeah. I broke myself up a few times, and when I go into the hospital, I'm the one screaming. I like that stuff too much. In fact, they had to go in and put metal in me to hold my ribs together, and I kept screaming about being a drug addict and alcoholic, so they gave me oxycodone for 4 days and then took me off it because I kept complaining. I don't like how this shit feels. So one of the things, because I'm an alcoholic of my caliber, I got a high pain threshold. I've broken over 50 bones in my body racing motorcycles and dirt bikes, and I even got hit head on by a female Oriental driver one day. She was wearing glasses. They put us both in the same ambulance. Yeah, and I was sober. So you get to do a lot of things in Alcoholics Anonymous. You get to live life. You get to live through adversity. We took my wife out to Anacapa Island a couple of weeks ago to spread her ashes, my daughter and me. And after we spread her ashes, she mentioned to my friend Scott, who's in the program, I've never fished in the ocean. He said, grab a pole. And she pulled up 5 sand dabs, and she was just, 31 years old, holding 2 of these sand dabs by her head, saying, oh, look, I caught fish. She was all so happy. And as we were coming back, we'd seen dolphins all day. But as we were coming back, we saw the largest pod of dolphins I've ever seen in my life. All playing and dancing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a sperm whale tail came up and gave us a wave. And I told my daughter, that must be Mom, waving goodbye. See, as I said, Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to love, and it taught me how to be in love. I have 2 daughters. Real quick story about my other daughter. Because of Alcoholics Anonymous, the integrity that she had, she was in a car accident. And I told her to take it over. The guy does the custom paint on my truck, and she did. And she went over to pick her car up, and he said $600. And she looked at Alex and said, how do I give the rest of this money back to the insurance company? He goes, what? They can't be mad at you for getting a good deal on your repair. You better talk to your dad. So my daughter called me up and she said, Daddy, the insurance company gave me too much money for the repair on my car. I said, what? So? She goes, how do I give this money back to the insurance company? I said, you want a what? So I told her, once an insurance company cuts a check, they don't ever want to hear from you again. They consider the matter closed. She goes, what do I do with this money? I said, call it pain and suffering. It's yours to do whatever you want. What are you going to spend it on? She goes, I'm going to put it in the bank and save it. That daughter is a program manager for Northrop now in Florida. We get to do all kinds of wonderful things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've got to live a wonderful life, a life beyond my wildest dreams. Only because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would have missed it. So for you newcomers, you guys in your first year, keep coming back. If you don't like it, we'll gladly befriend your misery. But just keep coming back. Get a sponsor. Do your best to work the steps. You don't have to do anything perfect here. It's progress, not perfection. I want to thank everybody here for listening to my story. I could go on for hours. I mean, you want to ask an alcoholic about himself, they can talk forever. But I don't have forever. And I have a limited amount of time. And I want to thank you, and I want to tell you this. I have enough money in my pocket to buy a pack of cigarettes or a cheap cigar. I got a roof over my head, and God hasn't let me go hungry since I got sober. Thank you very much for having me. Yes.
All righty, let's thank our speaker again. Yeah, that would be...